Draft prototypes? What prototype is best for this Raptors roster? Defensive bigs, playmaking guards, 3-and-D wings? That's coming up on the new Locked On Raptors.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's your favorite part of the day. Thanks for joining us here on Locked On Raptors, your team every day. On this Tuesday, June the 10th, I am cranking up the hosting duties once again. I'm Vivek Jacob. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors for 8 seasons across several outlets. You can follow it all on X, Instagram, and YouTube. And be sure to check out the Locked On Raptors Discord, where you can talk all things basketball, but especially the Raptors. Link is at the bottom. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Let's get this party started. I've called him the Kyle Lowry of Locked On Raptors, and I'm sticking with it. He's currently the splinter to my Leonardo, the one and only Sean Woodley. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. Are you talking about my ass? Are you talking about how thick my juicy doubles are? Is that how we're starting the podcast?
I'm talking about the way you're having to guide me through all this hosting stuff.
Oh,
shepherding me through.
Oh, I get it now. I'm not much of a Ninja Turtles guy, so for a second I thought Splinter was the bad guy, but that's Shredder, right?
Correct. And I didn't know that. Okay. Oh my God. That is big news on the podcast today. Big reveal. Sean, not a fan of the Ninja Turtles.
Not that I'm not a fan. I just never really partook. It was kind of just like, I think its peak was right before I was of age to really take it all in. And then, it just kind of missed me. All told at every kind of era. But I'm having a child soon. Maybe the child will get me into the Ninja Turtles. I don't know. Is that child-friendly stuff? Maybe. I don't know. So you have to tell me.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's all child-friendly stuff. I mean, right. I watched it as a kid. Look at how I turned out.
Okay. Carry on. Definitely.
Less said, the better. No. Moving on to bigger and better things. Sean, we are going to talk about prototypes on this show, looking specifically at draft prospects. And so I thought this would be a fun topic for us to have, looking at the different types of players that are available. And so, even when looking at a center, are you someone who prefers a defensive big over an offensive one? Are you someone who prefers a playmaking guard over maybe the combo type and has that scoring juice to them? Are you really leaning in on 3-and-D wings and really missing OG Anunoby? Beyond that, we're also going to get into some specific, guard stuff and forward stuff and positional stuff. And so, hey, look, you've got Emmanuel Quickley and Jamal Shead on the roster. How important does that make selecting a guard with size? So to start off here, let's get into the prototypes.
Yeah,
we decided to make this a bit of fun, and so we are getting into power ranking them.
Are you saying this might be something of an unofficial stupid little game, Big V?
This might be my intro into my first unofficial stupid little game. And so we've got the positions. We've got defensive big, offensive big, playmaking guard, scoring guard, 3-and-D wing. Who you got number one?
And so, we're doing this in relation to the Toronto Raptors, not just like our favorite types of guys to look at in the draft.
Yes,
specifically,
absolutely.
At number 9, the Raptors' needs. I've gone back and forth on this one. Here's the thing: I think the Raptors could use a lot of these types of guys. I don't think any of them is like a pressing, oh God, the team cannot go forward if they don't address this thing via the draft immediately type of need. I would say for me, stick with me here, because I actually don't think this player is going to be available for the Raptors at number 9, at least not a player that I'd feel comfortable taking at number 9. And that's a scoring kind of combo guard, right? I think someone who can set the table and share the creation duties with Quickley, Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, all of whom are going to have some modicum of offensive responsibility on this sort of new look version of the team. Obviously, RJ Barrett's part of this as well, although I think RJ Barrett's best served as an off-ball play finisher. We don't need to relitigate that. You can listen to, the last 500 episodes where I've talked about RJ Barrett maybe getting traded. But yeah, I think if you can add some more scoring punch, some half-court creation to this team, goes a long way. And I think, I'm not of the mind that Emmanuel Quickley simply cannot do any of that stuff. I actually think he, with his three-point gravity, his pull-up juice, he can manipulate the defense that way and create and sort of, find advantages that way. And I think he's quite good at that. And I think he kind of gets still a bad rap for this past season. I think there was a lot of good stuff that happened in the back part of the year when no one paid attention or cared. And I think we're still doing the he was injured, therefore he is bad thing with him, which I think is wrong. But I do think it's pretty clear. Like, there was a reason why getting number 2 in this draft felt so exciting, because a guy like Dylan Harper would be such a perfect fit with this team to add some more juice to the backcourt, add some size at the guard position as well. And I know we'll talk about some other guards who might be around, one guard in particular who's a little taller, who might be, someone who people are interested in. You wrote about him yesterday in your newsletter, by the way. But I think that's the type of guy that would be like a perfect, okay, if you could drop a creative half-court engine type guard into this team who can score and create for others, perfect. I just don't know if that player is going to be available at 9, but I do have them as number 1 on my list because, like, if you could get that dude, changes the game quite a bit for this team.
Yeah, no question. I think that's an intriguing spot for me. Number 1, the way I looked at it was just, hey, what is the biggest positional need? And to me, it's quite clearly a center. And so right now, do I prefer offense or do I prefer defense? I think, if you're a skeptic,
how about both? Wouldn't that be great? Get both.
Well, yeah, if that perfect player was there and could do both, that would be wonderful. But you kind of look at the way things are playing out in terms of who's going to be available around 9. That's kind of the choices that you're going to have to make. And I do think that for me, when you look at, the Raptors defense, if you're a bit of a skeptic about the way things played out in the second half of the season and saying, hey, okay, the defensive numbers looked great, but they also came against sub 500 teams for the most part.
A lot of 3-point shooting variance luck too.
Yeah,
which hasn't really been talked about, but they had, I think it was the lowest allowed 3-point percentage in the back part of the season. So
yeah. So I think from that standpoint, you could look at it and just say, hey, if the defensive upside is there, that's something you want to lean in on. Obviously, if you could get that offensive polish, that'd be amazing. I think if you could get someone who could defend pick and rolls, was a decent rim protector, and had the offensive polish, that'd be, I think, to me, a no-brainer to pick. But that player does not seem to be available in this draft. And so I put the defensive big first. And then second, this was probably more of a tricky one. But I went with, as you alluded to, the playmaking guard who has some of that scoring pop. I think that's something that, to me, the guard position is not fully something that you're settled with. I think this is a big year for Quickley to prove his worth. Obviously, Jamal Shed is having his first full season as the backup point guard. And so we have to see how that shakes out. And so you could come out of this season saying, hey, this is something that still needs to be addressed. So I think if there was that type of guard that was available, if you were higher up in the draft, as you said, number 2, that would be wonderful. But at number 9, those players might be gone. So we got number 3.
Yeah, just to piggyback off your point quickly before I get into that, I think, the idea of just adding more guard talent to the team is really exciting to me. Like, it's just like we're seeing in the NBA, right? In the playoffs, in the finals, like the Pacers have multiple guards they can go and throw out there. TJ McConnell coming off the bench, Andrew Nembhard taking some of the burden off of Tyrese Halliburton. Like, having a lot of guards is a really good thing to have. And so, again, I'm not opposed if they take a guard. I think the guard who's most likely to be there at 9 at the top of boards is not quite my cup of tea. And so I'm a little skewed against that specific player who, again, we're teasing, baby. This is good podcasting. We'll talk about that guy later. But yeah, I'm with you in just like having some guard ability would be great. And then I also had defensive big as number 2 on my list because I think, frankly, the defensive big who will be available potentially at 9 is far more interesting than the offensive coded bigs. I did have both the big men as 2 and 3, like defensive big second, offensive big third. I think, they could use a 3-and-D wing. You can always use more 3-and-D wings. And I think, I wouldn't be upset by any means. Again, they could use all of these types of players, but having a big man sort of succession plan behind Jakob Poeltl, if you got an offensive big in there who has a little bit of stretch to his game, I mean, that's a huge boon to your versatility, the different types of lineups you can play. Can you play double big lineups, which have become more of a thing these days? And so I have both types of bigs as 2 and 3 for me, defensive a little bit edge towards, because I'm with you. I think they need to reinforce what they did defensively down the stretch. There was a lot of good stuff going on, but I don't think they have the raw talent to be, a top half of the league defense over the course of a full season when teams are ready for it. And so that's kind of why I have the defense ahead of offense big wise. But yeah, I think both would be great as number 2 options. They could use size, large people in a sport where large people find success more often than smalls. I'm all for it. And then I have 3-and-D wing is 4, and then I have like a straight playmaking guard. Like, I don't think they need just like a straight table setting guard. I think that type of player, as we saw with Davion Mitchell this season, is kind of limited in what they can offer you, kind of like what we see with Mike Conley Jr. as well now at his sort of advanced age. I think you need a little more dynamism offensively from your guards, kind of no matter what position they're technically playing.
Yeah, I think for me, just to round out, because I had the offensive big after that, and then I think looking at the 3-and-D wing, I think part of why that's become more prevalent for me is this stuff about the Raptors looking for a big fish, right? And I think that's where if you are looking at giving up one of those guys, or 2 of those guys, if it's Grady Dick, Jacoby Walter, RJ Barrett, you put him in that mix in a potential deal. You do kind of want to reinforce that side of it. And let's face it, the Raptors right now don't have that elite wing defender. And so I think for me, that's where, I put that 3-and-D wing among the list of priorities. Where are you on that?
Yeah, like I said, like you can use a 3-and-D wing at all times, I think. And I think
maybe I guess does any of the trade stuff factor into it?
Oh, yeah. I'm with you there. Like, I think, especially if you're making a trade for a big fish, like the ideal thing is that you're kind of having like a team where guys can easily fit in around who that player might be. And maybe it's not this summer, right? Like maybe the Giannis thing fizzles out and they, have to play it into next summer. But having as many guys as possible on the roster who could theoretically fit around a star is, I think, a good thing. And so, yeah, a 3-and-D wing, a guy like Cedric Coward, for example, just like an obvious fit on most teams. And that's why he's very high up my list. It's interesting. Like I have 3-and-D wing as my 4th ranked on this list, but if I'm ranking my favorite prospects at 9, I think Cedric Coward is number 2 behind Khaman Maluach. And so I'm not turning my nose up at a 3-and-D wing there whatsoever if that's the best kind of guy available at number 9.
We'll leave it there for now. Coming up on the other side, we'll get to potential versus current skill set. NBA fans, you know what time it is. Playoff season means big performances and even bigger rewards. DoorDash is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for DashPass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called the They Swoosh, You Score. Anytime a player scores 50 or more points in a playoff game, DashPass members score a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the very next day. Just place an order of $20 or more, use the code Wingstop50 at checkout, and that combo is yours. The offer is valid noon to midnight the day after the game, and terms apply. What's your go-to move after an epic game? Are you ordering wings and reliving the highlights? Imagine being rewarded with free food just because someone went off for 50. So here's the play. Sign up for DashPass to unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long. When any player scores 50 plus in a playoff game, DashPass members can grab a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the next day with a $20 order or more. Code is Wingstop50. That's DashPass, your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms apply. All right, Sean, let's get into the age-old debate. I think we know the Raptors as a franchise have generally spoken about picking the best talent available. But
Mhm.
when we look at this roster as it stands, looking to kind of promote itself beyond this rebuild phase, become a playoff team, looking at the needs, are you looking at someone who is more ready to help the team right now versus someone who is more of a project?
I'm very torn on this. I'm not gonna lie, because I think there's a pretty compelling argument both ways. Like from the just pure talent thing. I've talked a lot about how, in the lead up to the lottery, how the Raptors stand to gain so much if they nail this pick and somehow come out of this draft with a star. Obviously, that was way more likely when there was a chance they might be picking in the top four. Less likely now they're picking at 9, just based on the sheer odds of things. But I do think there's a pretty compelling case to take a real swing on an upside play who you think, hey, maybe he's not the most likely guy to be like a long-term NBA contributor, but if things really hit, this guy can be a star if it all breaks right. And I think with the way the team is set up, like they have a pretty sound infrastructure in terms of just like depth and guys who are going to be part of this team for a little while, guys who are locked up. I think they can afford to take a bit of a gamble. That said, this is hopefully they're going to be their last high pick for a while, or at least the last time they're picking this high. And I could totally see the argument for like, let's just get ourselves another good NBA player in the door as well. And there might be a couple of guys where you're kind of able to split the difference and find a guy who can help now and maybe has more to grow into down the line. Which I think, with a couple of my favorite options, I think that is very much the case. But yeah, generally you want to just go the best player, but I do think fit has to be baked into sort of how the Raptors make their decisions here. A, because their roster's pretty set up already, and fit is going to matter. Like again, everything goes through the lens of does this fit with a Scotty Barnes team? And so I think you have to still apply that lens to all these guys. And I think this part of the draft is very flat too. I think it's a lot of guys who stand a chance of being like pretty good NBA long-term starters, but it depends on where they land for them to really hit those high-end outcomes. And so I am kind of skewing more towards like the best skill now, the best fit now versus swinging for the super high upside talent. I think, again, there's a couple of guys where you can have your cake and eat it too a little bit, but I'm curious where you come down on it.
Yeah, so for me, I'm with you. I think it is about getting someone who could potentially be contributing to the rotation immediately. I do
Mhm.
think that that is the current state of the franchise, and I think it is about making those solid picks. And even when I look back, that era when you were bringing in, Norman Powell and OG Anunoby and Pascal and Fred, and if you look beyond that, like DeLon Wright, it was all they were all part of that similar vein of thinking. And
Mhm.
then the one outlier obviously was Bruno, right? And you really swung for the fences on that one. So I think if they use that same strategy now, it's like, hey, let's make enough of these solid picks where we have a Grady Dick, we have a Jacoby Walter, we have a Jamal Shed, Jonathan Mobo. And then once we feel we've built it up to a good point, which maybe as soon as after this draft and maybe next
Mhm.
year, that's when we'll take our big swing.
Sure.
Um, and so I think for now, you are still in this state of picking up guys who you think will have high enough floors where the risk isn't there.
There's a ton of value in just getting good players on cheap contracts, right? Like I think that is part of the deal with this new CBA as well. Is I wonder if we do see teams target guys who are a little more NBA ready and sort of, again, there are some teams that can totally afford to take the time because they got nothing going anyway, right? Like if the Utah Jazz want to take a crazy swing at 5 and take Noah Senge, like okay, sure, what the hell else you got going on, right? But the Raptors theoretically want to be competitive next year, and that's not to say that like it would be a total waste if they took a guy who doesn't contribute to the NBA team next year, because you do have to have the long game in mind as well. But I do think if you can kind of optimize with a team that's pretty expensive already, if you can optimize what you're getting from the back end of the roster by getting a guy in the door who can contribute 3 to 4 years of like solid bench to maybe starter play by the end of that contract, like that's a huge, huge advantage in today's financial climate, especially for a team that has already devoted a lot of its funds and kind of locked in its top players. Not to say they can't trade those guys and kind of move on, But that's another thing too, right? Is if like you can get like a good rookie player in the door, that becomes another piece you're able to trade in a year if you know you come to the point where you're looking to make a big swing, right? So yeah, it runs a little counter to the sort of best player available brain, although I will say, and I've said it before, let's retire that whole phrase because it's stupid and meaningless because every single team has its own impression of who the best player available is. So, like, I don't care what Joe Schmo on the internet thinks is the best player. Like, it's irrelevant to me. It's not a thing. But yeah, I think in this case, getting someone who can get in and play right away, there's just such a value add to that with how the financial landscape of the league is set up.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that, I think the last thing I'll add is when you look at the Raptors center position in terms of what you were saying, like, hey, is there someone who can be a solid enough contributor as a backup, but you also see in the long term becoming a starter? That at the center position would be ideal because it's like, okay, you've got Jakob Poeltl, let whoever it is ply their trade, learn the game, and then maybe at the end of their rookie contract, they're able to step into that starting role. Maybe Yak is being phased out. Maybe Yak is ready to transition into a bench role. We don't know. And so I think that part of it, if you look specifically at that position, can be interesting. And we are going to get into more specifics on
Hold
the
on. Before you do that, we're dancing around it here. Is Khaman Maluach your like top option for the Raptors at 9? Just like
yes.
he is for me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Great.
Yeah. I think there's been this chatter about like, oh, why are you picking a guy who would be this backup and a bit of a project when this team is transition? And it's like,
guess what? That's all rookies, man.
That's the role that is best suited right now as well at the center position because Yak is going to be the starter. So it is ideal that it's like, okay, this is someone who is best suited to a backup role and will learn. And then you still see enough starter potential to say, hey, in 3-4 years, if the polish comes along, again, this is a guy who started playing basketball 5 years ago. So we don't know where he's going to be at in 3 or 4 years. And if that offensive game looks completely different from what it is now. And so that to me is why you would look at that and say, okay, this isn't like, there's absolutely no reason to look at this as some type of like Bruno type swing.
No, because he comes with a baseline. Like he's going to be a rim protector who's enormous, who's a rim deterrent, who also dunks everything that he catches on the roll, right? He's like a vertical threat the Raptors don't currently have. I think it would make the life of a guy like Emmanuel quickly a whole lot easier to be throwing lobs up to that dude with the catch radius he has. He had like a 74% true shooting in college. He's a good free throw shooter. And like, I think this is exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to kind of splitting the difference is that I think he, at the very least, has a long career as a very good backup center who protects the rim and gets you garbage buckets around the cup. And the upside of him, if he ever figures out the shot or sort of the refinement in the passing areas of the game, he becomes such a valuable type of big man in a league where everyone is looking for that type of big man. That's where your upside comes in. And no, he's not going to be a 28 point a game big man. Upside is more than just points per game, which I think is the thing that drives me like absolutely nuts about talking about players all the time. Is Trey Johnson's got incredible upside because he's a bucket. It's like, well, yeah, sure, but does he do anything else? Like, I don't know. Khaman Maluach can be an anchor for a defense. I'm pretty convinced of that at some point in his career, and a damn good one. And if the threes ever come along, like that is such a swing skill to turn him from good, totally capable rotation player, which is a great thing to get at number 9, into, oh my God, you have one of the most valuable players in the NBA because of what he does for you with the shooting. Like that to me is the perfect splitting of the difference of the talent versus ability to contribute now.
And those type of specifics are exactly what we are going to get into on the other side. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a completely financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. All right back at it here. Sean, we are going to get into this final segment. And, we've talked a lot in generics. We are going to get into the specifics of it all. I think when you look at this draft, when you look at this Raptors roster, how much are you baking into, and we've touched on this, here and there on the podcast, but say if you're looking at a guard and you're seeing this Raptors roster and you're seeing Emmanuel Quickly and Jamal Shed, how much of that is factoring into, hey, you know what? I don't think we can actually look at the Raptors roster and say taking a guard under 6'4" makes sense.
Yeah, I'm a little torn because, there's one guard who, if he's there at 9, I don't care how tall he is, he's the pick. Even more so than Khaman Maluach. There's Jeremiah Fears. I'm very bullish on Fears figuring it all out in the NBA. He's 18 years old. He should have been a high school senior this year. I know he didn't shoot well from 3, but he killed it from mid-range. He was like an 85% free throw shooter. I think there's going to be three-point juice to his game, and his ability to just get to the rim is incredible. He didn't finish well at the rim, but he's also 18 and was playing in the toughest conference we've maybe ever seen assembled in college basketball. I think as he gets stronger and gets more sort of confident in himself, that's going to round itself out. Maybe he's never going to be like an elite at rim finisher, but the way he gets there, getting to the line as often as he does, and just the fact that he's a child who needs to bulk up, I think it's going to be just fine. And so I think, regardless of how tall I think he measured 6'2" at the combine. Don't care. Like, he's got enough star juice to me, if it all works out, that I'm just taking him and figuring it out. And hey, if you play two small guards in your backcourt, great. If you need to figure it out and move one of them down the line, fine. You got the most talented guy on the board in the door. And so I'm not specifically looking straight at just like measurables when it comes to specifically the guard core, right? Like, yeah, it'd be great to get a big guard. Big guards are awesome. Tyrese Halliburton's a big guard, and look how great he's doing. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's a big guard. It's all working out well. But I don't think you can fall into the copycat thing of, well, those big guards are being successful, therefore we must take this big guard because he's big, without looking at all the other stuff that he brings to the table. And so I think we're kind of dancing around talking about Kasparas Yakachonis here a little bit, who seems like the most likely guard to be in the mix at 9. And I've gone into it on my show, on the show in previous days, just like, I don't really quite see it in the half court for him as someone who's going to really kind of lead your offense, be a guiding force. I think he's got way more off-ball juice as a shooter and stuff like that, but he can't get to the paint in college. What's he going to do in the NBA against NBA level defenders? Like, if he can't turn the corner now, I don't know if that's coming around in the NBA. And so, I'm just going on pure talent for the guards. Like, who brings the most tangible, good, helpful guard skills? And I'm less worried about size because you can figure that stuff out later. And hey, they roll a pretty big front court as well. Ingram, Barnes, Pirtle is enormous. That gives you a little bit of leeway to maybe be smaller in the guard spots and, kind of play around with how those things can all fit.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think, when I look at Yakachonis, I think it's that ability to create paint touches that is going to be so valuable for this Raptors team. And if you can't bring that, I think it's really hard to see the fit. I think, another equation that you kind of look into roster versus, what's available in the draft. When we look at these 3-and-D wings or even, these power fours, I think, the value of the jump shot is going to be really high for me. And it has been in just watching the film so far. And so I think that's why, so far watching a guy like Carter Bryant, I'm like, yeah, there's a trust there that he'll be able to knock down the NBA 3, where I say, okay, you know what, I'm leaning more towards a guy like that, as opposed to, obviously he'll be playing a bigger position, but Colin Murray-Boyles, like, I'm struggling to get there with him. What about you?
Yeah, Colin Murray-Boyles, like, I've talked about it, extremely cool player, extremely Sean-coded prospect. I think he'd be a miserable fit on the Raptors, and I don't think he'd be getting the best out of him or putting him in a position to succeed. I think For me, yeah, it really like those wings, like Carter Bryant, I'm a little less sold on because I don't think like the rest of the offensive package is a surefire thing to come around. It's why I'm so in on Cedric Coward, and I'm curious where you are on Coward because I feel like I'm higher on him than most, but like, and I know the competition wasn't great. Like, we know all the caveats. You can't fake being as lights out a shooter as he's been at every stop in college. You can't just like manufacture that shooting touch. Like, mid 80s from the line, 40% from three over his career, shoots like absolute butter from the mid range. Like, he hits everything he takes. He shot 71% on twos this year. That's crazy. Like,
Yeah.
I just think like that shot making acumen is so huge. And that he again is a guy I look at as someone who has some upside to tap into as well because he measured well athletically and he's got the shooting touch. And like that type of stuff, that outlier shooting touch, you're hearing this a lot in sort of draft circles of how this is a league of outliers. This is a league where outlier skills kind of reign supreme. And I'd say Cedric Coward's shooting touch is an outlier skill in this draft. The way he just hits every damn thing he takes, no one else can match that. I think there's a very real chance he's the best shooter in the draft. And if that's the case, and you also have the 6'6" with the 7'2" wingspan and good measurables, and the passing juice that he showed this past season as well, again in limited time. But I just think like there's a real star path for Cedric Coward if it all comes together. And if not, the baseline is excellent 3-and-D role player who can fit in any kind of lineup, play the 2, play the 3, maybe slide down to the 4 if you're going super small. Like I'm just so in on Coward as a guy who fits easily. And so, yeah, maybe he's not the most sort of direct need on the team, but to me, again, he's a way you can kind of split the difference between the contribution in the now and what he can become later. Yes, he's an older prospect. Wings who are older, I'm a little less worried about because those guys take forever to come around anyway. And so I'm just, I'm Coward pilled, man. I'm curious where you're at with him.
Yeah, no, I think he's going to be a really good player. I think there's plenty of valid reasoning behind, viewing him as someone who is quickly rising up the charts. And I'm at the point now where I'm saying, is it worth 9, or do you say, okay, in a couple of weeks now, is he still going to be in that 15 to 20 range where you look at trading down? And I think that's more what I'm looking at right now. Obviously, as we've discussed, if Maluach is there, I think that is the guy that makes the most sense. But if you're looking for someone who can be a contributor now while also having that upside potential, I think Howard is an awesome pick. And I think it's more about, as I get more into the film, it's like, hey, is he worth taking a gamble at 9, or are you looking at trading down and, seeing maybe what else is out there?
See, I'm in this draft in particular, I'm so anti trading down for the Raptors. I think like the talent drop off is kind of precipitous after like the middle part of the lottery. And I just don't think there's any guarantee if you trade out of 9 that Cedric Coward is still there at 15, for example. Say you make that trade that everyone's throwing around with the Thunder with 24 and 15. Like, I'm sorry. If you think Cedric Coward passed up an NIL bag from Duke because he doesn't have a lottery promise, I feel like you're kind of missing the boat a little bit. Like, I think he's going in the lottery, and I'm just taking my guy at 9 from the Raptors. I'm trying to get the best player I can, trying to have the biggest sort of pool of guys to choose from as I can. And I don't really care about the notion of reaching or not. Like, this is a team that's quote unquote reached before. They took Scotty Barnes at 4 when everyone was like, oh my God, he should be like the 7th pick. Why aren't you taking Jalen Suggs, you fools? And like, that's worked out perfectly fine. They don't seem to care about consensus. And that's what I like about this front office. I think there's way too much groupthink when it comes to draft evaluations. And it's just like, well, just because this guy said it, therefore it must be true. I mean, when was the last time that the consensus rankings before a draft ended up being an exact order of the best players in a draft? Doesn't happen, right? And so if the team has their own evaluations and they think this is the guy we want at 9, just take the guy there. Don't worry about being perceived as having made a reach, and just take your dude and trusted your scouting staff and the guys you have making these decisions, which, like, I think at this point, the Raptors front office, you can have your qualms with what they've done over the years, but their drafting acumen is pretty unassailable when you look at the sort of grand scheme of things. Everyone's going to have misses here and there, but they've been damn good at this. And so I'm just giving them the best pick they can have in this draft and letting them cook and take their guy.
Well, there it is. Sean has spoken. I don't think there's any other definitive take that you need on what the Raptors should be doing. With that, I'm going to thank you for tuning in. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen today. For your second listen, check the Locked On NBA Big Board Show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. For us, that's it. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, and join us in the Discord for more.
Bye. Damn it.